last 30 years?
I would just say for the last 30 years, what I'm seeing is something that we are now starting to pay more attention to, and that's trauma, and how trauma impacts our young folks. And back 30 years ago, a lot of our students were over-punished and over-disciplined because they didn't really understand what some of the things that the students bring, coming from dysfunctional backgrounds, some of the parents that have been incarcerated, homelessness. Now you have newcomers who are coming here or unaccompanied. There's so much, in the areas that I serve, there's so much need for our students, and we have to better understand how we can meet their whole needs. Not just academic, but the social, emotional, and safety needs as well. So I think now we're starting to become more aware of what our kids are bringing and how we can better serve them. So providing those type of counseling services, providing those resources so that our kids can come to school and not be hungry and not know where their next place is and have some stability, because there's a high transiency rate in some of the areas that I serve. And, with the cost of living in Los Angeles, our parents are, a lot of our kids are living on the streets. And so just figuring out how we can meet that need first and then kind of focus from there on how we can educate our students.
So if I were to touch on this, it's probably piggybacking on Dr. Sample, talking about, so I'm real big on this thing we call double consciousness, right? From W.E.B. Du Bois, and that's from back in the early 1900s. And so with double consciousness, that tells us that for our students and for us ourselves as people of color, every day we battle with who we are in our community, and then who we are when we're on our campus, on our jobs, and things of that nature. And so I also argue that now we in 2019, that we no longer just battle double consciousness, we battle this triple consciousness, right? And so no longer with our community, for our students with the community, and then going to school, but then they also battle technology, and so what they see in social media and how they deal with that. And so on the one hand, when you come back home and you come back to your community, you're trying to be this one person and trying to deal with whatever factors that our students are hit with there. And then you go to the school, and then you battle with whatever your teacher, counselor, or principal gives you, right? And then social media, that's what you're on, our students are on every single day, and they're trying to figure out what is that mechanism that tells them who they are, how they should be, what's funny, what's not funny, how you should look, how you should not look. And so all these things that 30 years ago, or maybe over 40 years ago for some of us, it wasn't the same thing. I didn't have to battle that. I just had to battle trying to get home, right? And then also dealing with what's going on my campus. And so those things have been a challenge for our students, not to also include the curriculum that they have to try to overcome that's constantly changing.
I observed a lot of resistance from students resisting against the normal structure of school. In the classroom, and I think education is moving into this place where we want to get real cool about what is the culture that we're bringing our kids into, because of that big resistance. And it's a lot of the things that most of our panelists have shared today is times have changed. Kids are coming into school with backpacks full of trauma. And as teachers, a lot of times we aren't given the skills to be able to meet kids where they are. And so there's this constant fight between what you're supposed to come to school and do, and what everyone says that's the typical traditional way, but then also waking up every morning and seeing beautiful Black and brown children in your classroom dealing with more than just reading and math.
I just wanted to share some research and a little bit of study so you guys can have some context. I was doing a study with Dr. Howard. I don't know if you know Tyrone Howard from UCLA, and his wife is a social worker, and he was sharing that, not only are students are suffering from stress, it's almost like secondhand smoke. When you have a person who's smoking, sometimes it transfers over to the person near. A lot of times our educators inherit some of the trauma and stress. So I just want to share a little bit of statistics. 40% of teachers visited the doctor for stress-related problems. 20% admitted drinking too much. So you got to think about who's educating our kids too and what they're dealing with. 15% admitted to being alcoholics. 25% reported stress-related problems associated with hypertension, insomnia, depression, and gastrointestinal disorders. And then 11% reported suffering from nervous breakdown. So a lot of times when we're working with these type of situations with our students, it sometimes carries over to the adults as well. So in addition to taking care of our students, we got to look at how we can also make sure the people who are serving our students are well as well. I was going to say that also it says 50% reported traumatic stress, another 55% irritability. We know you can get irritated. 65% heartburn, 70% depressive problems, 72 chronic fatigue. I know I wake up tired. I know a lot of us are tired every day. We got to do what we got to do for our kids. So, and then 85 coming to work even when they're sick and ill because we know our kids need us. So those are other things that tie in too as we're educating our students, just the impact that it has on those who are serving our students in our communities. And then with the whole ICE thing, you know, they're raiding schools and they're supposed to be safe havens. So you got parents who are afraid to send their kids to school because they don't know if they're going to be taken away and put in a detention facility. So all these different things our community has to worry about. And it's not to make excuses, it's just to better understand who we're serving so we can better meet their needs.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Along those lines, and we're gonna get into the meaty part of it. When we look at the data says that typically those students who are in certain areas perform better than students that are in another area. And so we just dealing with LA. And so when you look at some of our coastal cities, Malibu, Laguna Hills, even Marina del Rey, some of those coastal areas, those students are performing at a higher level. And when we talk about performance, typically the two major areas that they do data on is English and math. Everything else is voluntary. So you can take social studies, you can take science. You may or may not take that. English and math are the two things that they record heavily as far as testing. So when we look at that, my question is, does racism or does racial tendencies have an impact on how schools are structured? And is there a educational gap when you talk about Black and brown students versus others?
Okay. So I don't know what Dr. Sample would say, but I've always said that systemically for our schools, and we were just talking about LA, the structure is racist, right? And so and why I say that is because systemically over time, when we have adopted education, there's certain policies and procedures that have kept long going. Not to say that administrators like Rady Sample haven't done what they can to help overturn some of those things, right? But if they've been in our part of our education system for over 400 years, right? And so we go historically, beginning for people of color, specifically African Americans, who were told you could not read or write. Right, and then over time, when you go to school and when you learn how to read and write, right, they're not giving you the tools necessary for you to be successful, right? And so we look at the tools. You said, oh, but everybody has books, but no, everybody doesn't have up-to-date books, right? You said, oh, everybody has teachers, but no one has teachers that have been in the system or at that school for 10 years or more, who have consistently poured in their students and understood the curriculum, while a lot of our urban schools have a lot of substitutes or have teachers that have been in that particular school for 1 or 2 years and they leave to go to other schools, districts, for other things. And so for me, yes, it's a systemic problem that we have. And will it get better? It will get better, but it will not change. Right? And so it's up to individuals and certain groups of educators to make different differences within their school, within their districts, to move the needle somewhat to give our students a chance.
So I currently work with an organization called Innovate Public Schools, And we work with parents, Black and brown parents, to really assess how is education doing for Black and brown students in LA. And what we found just recently for Black students, that there are only 31 top schools in LA for Black students, 31. And what we consider a top school is that they are closing the achievement gap for Black students. So Black students are performing at the same rate as white students. And what 31 schools are only top schools for Black children is already setting Black kids behind. And I know we all have the understanding that your parents and you're gonna push through and we're resilient and we're still gonna get to college and we're still gonna be successful in life. But there are students who don't have those advocates. There are students that don't have someone pushing for them. So when we're talking about the data and when we're talking about I guess responsibilities for this data and why is this gap the way that it is, yes, I think parents have a role in that, but also I have a huge question for the system and how are we continuing to make this system that was never set up for Black and brown children more inclusive for Black and brown children.
Real quick, and just to add to that is, you know, and I know the pastor talked about the achievement gap, but as we get for those 31 schools, and we have African American children or brown children who are doing very well, that still doesn't, we still have an opportunity gap that we still have to address every single day. That even though a Black or brown child can do just as well as a Black student, get the 4.0, get into a college, the opportunity gap, the data shows the opportunity for them to be quite successful in life is still far short to their white counterparts.
A lot of that goes to being the difference between being college eligible and being college ready. A lot of times when we go to some of our inner city schools, you have people who have low self-fulfilling prophecy, so they feel sorry for our student to give inflated grades because they want to see them go on. But you got to have empathy, not sympathy. We empathize with the issues that you go through, but that's why we want to hold you to higher standards and expectations, because your current circumstances does not dictate your outcome. And what we know is 70% of our teaching force are white women. And there is a cultural mismatch when you're looking at the students who come to us and those individuals who teach our students who've never really interacted with our kids beyond working in that school system. So when you look at African Americans who lead the nation in all negative trends, whether it's suspension rates, over-identifying special education rates, incarceration, a lot of this is contributing to subjective things. If you look at most students who are referred in special ed, a lot of times it's based on one experience from one teacher. And that one teacher could have just had a negative experience with that one kid who couldn't connect with them. Next thing you know, they're being referred as emotionally disturbed, which is a big concern. And so now, then you have foster kids and you have foster parents who are trying to get more money because they want their kid to be more severe than what they are. So it's all kind of things that are playing these important roles that our kids become, you know, the issue. And I want to add something else too about your smarter balance. About the testing. It's true, everything is ELA and math. And I just want to give some more statistics. I like to give a little data. So it says that this is in 2018. And it talks about the gaps in achievement for African American students persist. Only 31% of African American students met or exceeded standards, which means that 70% didn't in ELA. And only 20% met or exceeded the standards of math, which means 80% of our students aren't, in comparison to their white counterparts, who were at 42% in ELA and 31% in math. And then it also talks about how our African Americans are under-identified as gifted. Any one of you parents can go and just write a letter to your psychologist saying you want to see if your child is gifted and talented. And they have to be able to assess that. But oftentimes individuals want to only assess them for special education. And sometimes you have individuals who want to get a kid out of their classroom by saying, hey, by having your kid special ed, we're going to give them more services. That's not always the case. Oftentimes those students are the ones who get lack of better services. So just being knowledgeable, knowing the resources available on your campus, being able to reach out to your counselors, I think that goes a long way. And honestly, I'm thankful that you even have this type of topic, and I'm glad that the kids are here to hear this, because they need to. We want our kids to understand that we are behind here fighting for you every single day. And it's unfortunate the politics that we see. Like in my community, I can give you an example of, we cover from Palos Verdes, San Pedro, all the way down to Watts. And it's ironic that as an African American, you know, they give me Watts and South LA, which is good for me because that's my community anyway I want to serve. But when I look at the support that I get versus my colleagues who are in San Pedro and who they're getting extra directors and, you know, they have, my office is not even all the way set up. I have a network office. You should see how priority goes to the kids in San Pedro, the kids that are in Palos Verdes, the kids that are in Harbor City, the priority and how we talk about equity and access. We talk about giving the most resources to the most needy communities, but that's not actually what's going on in practice. So these are things we see every day, and my colleagues and I who service those communities where I'm at, we collaborate and we go out and we outreach and try to do things because we know a system is set up to keep us down. When we talk about opportunity and achievement gap, it's played out in education. It really is.
Yeah, I want to comment on my observation. I work at one of the programs I work at. It's homeschooling, and we have families from coastal areas and families from the inner city. What I see is those families for the students in the coastal area. The days that they're not at school, they're going on field trips. They have opportunities to get tutoring. They collaborate as a group, families come together and make sure that they have the education needed. Where as far as the kids of color, the parents, they have to work. They have to work and they can't provide the same opportunities. And a lot of times we have students that check out of the program because one, they can't keep up with the demands of the program, and then another, their students just falling behind. So the question about coastal and inner city, I see that on a daily basis with the facility I'm currently at.
So when we talk about education, we talk about the difference and the variance that we see. One of the questions that we got from the audience is, what can parents do? What can parents do to mitigate the shortfall in the quality of education?
Would you say right? I'm sorry.
So with working with Innovate, we have a theory of approach of how we see the problem, right? And we see that to be able to get a child college and career ready, there are three main stakeholders for that. One is the community, two is parent, and three is schools. We all have to uphold our end of the bargain to be able to make that happen. And the reason why I always go to that as my grounding point for questions like that of what do parents do is because oftentimes I feel like the responsibility is put on parents to get their child college and career ready. And oftentimes parents do not really know what's going to get their kid college and career ready. And they rely on the system to be able to do that. So I think there's two things that have to happen. I think one, parents have to be able to get really clear about what do they want to see in education to be able to work with the district to be able to make those things happen. I also think that the district has to be able to foster that relationship between parents, advocates, people who are standing in as parents for students to be able to strengthen that connection. In my work, I often hear both sides blaming the other. Parents blaming the district, districts blaming the parents. Or teachers blaming the children and parents and vice versa. And so I really believe that there has to be a relationship there to be able for us to see the progress.
So I think one of the things is that, so it's a couple of things. So we talked about college eligible, college ready, and so I think for parents, they need to know whether or not the schools are student ready, right? And so that means looking at the environment that their child is in. And so not everyone's not gonna know what that environment is supposed to look like, right? And so things like this today and reaching out to different parent advocate groups helps, right? Because I know when I was growing up, my dad only had 6th grade education, mom high school. And so to navigate those different things, for them, they were very communicative with my teachers and the administrators. But everybody isn't like that. Every person, some people have to figure out how to lower their anxiety to talk to authority, right? And so what I feel is best is that we create these networks. So Chosen G has figured out a way to create these networks here at this particular space, and creating other spaces. Either it's a space on campus, because we know we have our PSA. What is it? PSA? What do you call those things they have? No, with the parents. I ain't never been. There we go. Peers.
PTA?
Whatever you call it. You know, the parent groups. But also, when we have a lot of these parent groups on our campuses, it may not be for our child, right? Because it's not a one size fits all for every child that's on campus. My child is going to be very different from the whole group, not only as because of some of the identities she may have, right? And so we have to be very aware of the identities that our children have, and then the identities that we have and who we're communicating with. And so being able to understand those type of roles and the places that we are, and looking at the environment, diversity, the educators who are there, the administrators who are there, how are they going to help me and my child go to the next level? And so that's some of the things we need to look at for God.
And I could just speak for LA Unified for this, but on our campus, all of us are required to have what's called parent community reps in the parent center. So that doesn't mean that it's fully functioning just because it's mandated, but I think it's important that, you know, for our parent community reps, we have a series of trainings and workshops that we have to make sure that our parents are aware of, understanding A through G, which are college requirement courses. You know, understanding how important good attendance is and building those type of habits. There's a series of workshops that we have to do, but as a parent, one thing that you could do is make sure you serve on school site council, because that's where all the decisions are made. And school site council basically looks at the budget, and then they determine what the needs are for the student, whether it's a resource to help them with tutoring, or if it's an extra psychiatric social worker you need on campus. Make sure as a parent you go to your school or your child's school and say, when is the next school site council meeting? And that way you can go and be the eyes and ears and voice for your student, but also for the school community. And I think that would be a good starting point, is making sure you just attend the meeting and find out about school site council, because really that's where a lot of the decisions are made. And those vocal parents are the ones who, you know, squeaky wheel gets the wheel. So, you know, if you got that one parent who's always up there, and parent engagement doesn't necessarily mean you have to